Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Mero Fatemi. Getting right back into it here, we're going to talk a little bit about the Indiana Pacers Milwaukee Bucks series, a series that's gone completely under the radar, especially with the Knicks Pistons series, especially with even the Boston Celtics and Orlando Magic series, and then don't even get me started in the Western Conference. This series has just hit the curb a little bit. A series that the Indiana Pacers have really dominated in the three games that they've won. All three games by really decisive fashion, outside of maybe game 2 when they won by 7 points. I believe game 1 was a 19-point win for Indiana. This one being pretty decisive as well in game 4. 129-103 being the final score. The Indiana Pacers outscoring Milwaukee 28-19 in the fourth quarter. And it was pretty much, the game was over by the time the fourth quarter. It was a 10-point game going into the fourth quarter, so Milwaukee did still have a chance in this one. But when it was all said and done, Milwaukee's the. Before I get into Milwaukee a little bit, well, we have to talk about Damian Lillard before we can get further into this conversation. Damian Lillard suffering with blood clots, suffering from a blood clot injury before the playoffs even came around. 3 weeks before the playoffs even came around, suffering from that injury and really just trying to will himself back into the lineup, will himself back to be a part of this to be a part of this series, be a part of this Bucks team, because we haven't seen Giannis and Damian Lillard on the court together in the playoffs yet. Both of them at the same time. We haven't seen it. Last year, Giannis was out when they lost to Indiana in 5 games or 6 games, I believe. And then this season as well. Damian Lillard being out for the majority of it. Game 2, he did return. Game 2 and Game 3, he played. He played last night as well. But Game 2 and Game 3 were really not playing too well. I believe in Game 2, he had 14 points. Game 3, he had 7 points. He's just not looked like himself. Something we haven't really seen from Damian Lillard in his past. But at the same time, when you're suffering from blood clots, you can't really do very much. You just sit on the bench. You just have to let your body relax, because you can't, if you suffer a muscle tear and you have blood clots and you can't get blood flow into that muscle, it causes a whole bunch of complications. So it was just best. It's just best for players in his situation, or in his situation, to just sit on the bench, just relax, not doing very much, to stay home and let the blood thinners do their job. And they did. He came back in 3 weeks' time, something that a lot of doctors have come out and said was shocking. You don't really see players come back, or anybody come back from a blood clot injury, or having blood clots in general, come back in 3 weeks' time and be able to play full-time, high-level basketball, especially in playoff basketball. So, something we were just major props to Damian Lillard for even being able to do this, to even being able to try to pull this off. Game 3, let's start with Game 3. Damian Lillard was not the star in Game 3. The stars in Game 3 were Giannis Antetokounmpo and another guy by the name of Gary Trent Jr. Gary Trent Jr., I'm trying to pull up his numbers now. I believe he finished with over 38 points in this one. Scored more than 9 threes. Just an unbelievable performance from Gary Trent, a player that has not gotten a lot of love, a player that's gotten a lot of hate, specifically just in terms of just not being a great player, just being labeled as the overrated scorer for some reason. From his time in Toronto, we remember his time in Toronto. We remember, I believe he was with Indiana as well for a short period of time. But in this one, scoring 9 of 12 from three-point range, scoring 11 of 16 from the field, finishing with 37 points. The second leading scorer, or tied with Giannis with 37 points. The Milwaukee Bucks would not have gotten as far as they did if it wasn't for Gary Trent Jr. in Game 3. And honestly, it was just too much for the Pacers to overcome. I believe they just didn't. Haliburton shot 4 of 9 from 3 in that one. Nesmith was 4 of 8. Just Overall, not a great shooting performance from this team. Obi Toppin 0 for 4. Just not a great performance in Game 3 from the Indiana Pacers, but you're due for it. If you're playing the same team, if you're winning a best-of-7 series, sometimes you just have bad shooting nights, and especially on the other side, when you have a guy like Gary Trent Jr. that's shooting lights out, when you still have Giannis on the other side, who's an absolute shot maker, well, he is a shot maker, but a force that can create his own shot, can just shift the momentum on his own. It's just tough to match up when you're having a bad shooting night like the Indiana Pacers did in Game 3. So we thought going into Game 4 it would be more of a closer series. Milwaukee obviously winning Game 3 by 16 points, being down 2-1. Game 4 in Milwaukee, continuing to feed off the energy. We thought Milwaukee would have more of a chance than they did. But at the same time, it's not Milwaukee's fault. We'll get into it. I've said it many times on this show for this Milwaukee Bucks team, and I believe I talked with somebody in the chat that was talking to me about it late on Friday, on the last segment on Friday night. This Milwaukee Bucks team needs depth. They're in the same spot that the Los Angeles Lakers in, except that they don't have the top-heavy stars that the Los Angeles Lakers have. They have a Doc Rivers. This could be Doc Rivers' final year as a head coach. We may never see Doc Rivers as a head coach ever again after this year. Hasn't really made any playoff success. Has had a playoff. I don't even want to get into his playoff failures because this is another conversation for another day. But this is most likely Doc Rivers' last year as a head coach in the NBA. A team in the Milwaukee Bucks centered around Giannis Antetokounmpo. They bring in Damian Lillard. They give up Drew Holiday 2 years ago. And they really haven't added anything since then in terms of role players. Pat Connaughton hasn't really grown past 2022 when he had a couple great games in the playoffs. You bring in a Kyle Kuzma thinking he's going to improve the team, especially off the bench. Doesn't really do too much. I thought he could be an X factor in this series, but he really hasn't been. He's been in Game 4 only scoring 3 points. He really has not been the performer that we expected him to be in this series. But if I'm the Milwaukee Bucks, the biggest thing that hurts, especially I'm not even a fan of the Milwaukee Bucks. The thing that hurts even just looking at this team is Damian Lillard, player that's come back from blood clots injury, and now a player that possibly just tore his Achilles in Game 4. Early on in Game 4, I think it was the first 5 or 6 minutes of Game 4. We couldn't watch it because it was immediately after the finish of the Boston Celtics Orlando Magic series. So this game started a little bit early, but I believe it was about 5 or 6 minutes. Damian Lillard going down after a quick dribble. I believe Aaron Nesmith was guarding him, but just going straight down, not being able to put any weight on his left leg. Immediately calling for the trainers. If you guys remember how Kevin Durant went down, he immediately called for the trainers. He immediately grabbed at his Achilles, looked up at this jumbotron, and you could just see it on his face. You knew it was a bad, serious injury. That was the exact same reaction that Damian Lillard had in this one, and it was just sad. It was unfortunate. It was sad to see because a player like that it's just fought tooth and nail to get back into this series, fought tooth and nail to become another impact player for this Milwaukee Bucks team. And to go down the way he did, it's just unfortunate and sad to see because we know Damian Lillard, when he's healthy, what he can be, the level of talent that he holds, the way he plays the game of basketball he has so many playoff highlights, and we know how good Damian Lillard is, especially in the playoffs. Will he come back from this one? We've already seen from Kevin Durant. The biggest example we've seen from a major injury like this, especially the Achilles. We've seen players come back from ACL before. not always successful, not always the best, but more successful than Achilles. The most successful Achilles injury we've seen a player to come back and look closest to what he used to was Kevin Durant in 2019. And even then, Kevin Durant has lost in the playoffs 2 of the last 3 years, and this year he didn't even make the playoffs. So it's not his fault. We've talked about this, about the Phoenix Suns' disappointments this year, but you still don't make the playoffs. Not making the playoffs is not making the playoffs. There's no other way to slice it. So it's unfortunate to see. Damian Lillard, we wish him nothing but the best. I think he could come back for a year or two. I think he would do well on another team outside of Milwaukee, just because Milwaukee doesn't really have a whole lot of assets. I don't really want him to finish his career in Milwaukee because Milwaukee does not have a whole lot of assets to put around him. Giannis is most likely going to leave, whether it's this summer, whether it's next summer, whenever his contract ends, he's most likely going to leave, I would say. And that is also another conversation for another day. Giannis's future in Milwaukee is completely up in the air. We have no idea what's next for him, and it really could be this summer, it could be next summer, it could be the following summer when his contract ends. But I believe after this contract ends at the max, Giannis Antetokounmpo will not re-sign with this team. He wants playoff success. He wants to succeed. He wants to compete for NBA championships. If he can't compete for NBA championships, he doesn't want to be on a team. And it's not about how competitive you are as a team. It's about how the team meshes. It's about how the team is playing around the star player and what you're putting around him. And the Milwaukee Bucks have just not served that role to the point that Giannis would want to stay with this team. And I completely understand it as a whole. But overall, that's just the standpoint that I have on everything going on in Milwaukee right now. I lamented it at the beginning. Before the series kicked off, I thought Indiana had the deeper team, similar to what Minnesota did. For some reason, I turned a shy eye to the Los Angeles Lakers just because I thought their star power would be enough. Part of me still thinks that their star power could be enough to bring them back into the series based on how competitive they were in Game 3 and Game 4. I'm talking about the Lakers here. But the Milwaukee Bucks, I don't see in the same fashion. I think, especially without Damian Lillard, they don't stand a chance in this one. I think Indiana wins Game 5 decisively and will move on to face the Cleveland Cavaliers as they just went up 3-0 on the Miami Heat. They'll most likely finish the sweep in this one. They play later tonight. We'll preview a little bit of that series. Of course, we're going to focus more on the Golden State Warriors Houston Rockets series later tonight. We'll preview that in the last segment, but I'll touch on the Cleveland Cavaliers as well. It just looks like the Cleveland Cavaliers are on a collision course with the Indiana Pacers in the second round. And funny enough, that would mean that the second round is pretty much all set up. We'll talk a little bit about the Boston Celtics in our next segment as well. But that would put the Indiana Pacers facing the Cleveland Cavaliers and then the Boston Celtics against the New York Knicks, if all goes well. Nothing is decided, nothing is clinched, but that looks like where we're headed. That is the most likely outcome of all these series moving forward into this last week of the first round. But yeah, that's about all I have to say. It's a tough series. It's a tough thing to talk about. It's a tough topic to talk about just because Damian Lillard is one of the best players in the NBA, is one of the most underrated players in his entire career. Had to not, I wouldn't say suffer, but really carried that Portland Trailblazer team while he was in Portland. We saw many game-winning shots from him, winning series, winning games, having so many all-star appearances, in general, having so many playoff highlights in Portland. And we just want to see him win an NBA championship. We want to see him compete for an NBA championship. And we thought Milwaukee could be the destination for him, and it just hasn't panned out that way. So it's just unfortunate to see. But I'm going to take another short break, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at the Orlando Magic Boston Celtics series. A series that's kind of taken twists and turns that we haven't really expected. We're going to take We're going to talk a little bit about Boston, but I want to take a really deep look into this Orlando Magic team, a team that I really expected to give the Celtics a little bit of a hard time. I picked the Celtics in 6 games, but I thought Orlando could win 2 games. I thought they would win both of these games, both Game 3 and Game 4. And I was only 50% right, so I'll take it. At the end of the day, it is what it is. We'll talk a little bit about it in our next segment. Don't go anywhere.